Hello and welcome to another edition of Proficio Cyber Chats. Today we'd like to welcome Macy Dennis, Chief Security Officer for EVOTEK, and Brad Taylor, co-founder and CEO of Proficio. Today our guests are going to be discussing hot topic and industry bad word, ransomware, including how have attacks evolved and why have they become so popular, and what are some best practices we can adopt to be better prepared. And lastly, how can we come together as a cybersecurity community to help combat these issues? Let's chat. While today's threat landscape continues to evolve, challenging IT security teams daily, one consistent seems to be that ransomware attacks continue to plague organizations. How have these attacks evolved, and why have they become so popular?
I think anybody that's been watching anything in the news, for the last year, every fourth story is a ransomware attack, and they're all successful, obviously, if they're making the news. What we're seeing is a massive increase in the number of attacks and the number of successful compromises, which means that people are paying ransom. If people are paying ransom, attackers are going to continue to attack. I think the FBI said statistically the number of attacks has gone up about 300%. Now, we don't see that all, within our monitoring of security and infrastructures, but we've seen a double in the number of compromises for organizations just in the last 3 to 6 months. So the number of attacks are increasing, the sophistication is increasing, and the complexity is increasing. There is some changes in how attackers are actually performing ransomware attacks, which are helping us in some ways to actually detect them faster and respond, but they're much more sophisticated and much more dangerous. What are you seeing, Macy?
Yeah, Brad, you nailed it, especially with the data coming out from the Bureau and several other agencies that I'm connected with. It's increasing alarming rates. The ransomware plus the supply chain, it's really focused on, people don't realize it, but it's a lot of intelligence gathering. Everybody thinks about it's all about the money. The money is kind of like the extra sugar on top, if you think about it. The actors or criminals, and at times it could be a nation state even paying a criminal agency. They just want the data, the nation state, and allowing the criminals to keep the money. As far as the point of how they're increasing in complexity and things such as that, what it is just like all of us, they're learning as they go along. They're getting more advanced. They're realizing that they can get more out of the pie, so to speak. I think it's really important because we could sit here and say, you go put this box in place, this, and that. I don't think clients really need to focus on a whole stack of areas, which I know we're going to talk about. But it hits multiple different departments. It's the need of organizations like yourselves to be able to kind of be the eyes on glass with the binoculars looking for certain things, because the dwell time is increasing, where they're kind of sitting around and hanging out and getting what they need. And by the time they push that button to encrypt, it's already over. I mean, 70% of what they're doing is done. The rest of it's now just collecting your money.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. We've seen a dynamic change in the style of ransomware attacks. I think a year or 2 years ago, it was a lot of drive-by attacks. So it was, spray them out, see who catches, on a phishing attack. And then, an individual device gets compromised and automatically it triggers the encryption and it just encrypts the files that it has access to. That isn't happening anymore. It is a targeted attack using a lot of sophisticated information about the target. That's the bad news. The good news is it's not a single event automatically happening. We actually, as you mentioned before, it's multiple stages. So I have time to detect and respond before they actually push the button. But I need to detect quickly, validate quickly, resolve quickly, and respond quickly to contain. Because when that button's pushed, you don't have a lot of time and you got to react even faster.
A lot of organizations invest in various security tools to help them stay protected from ransomware and other cyber threats. But tools alone won't keep them safe. What are some best practices for being prepared for a cyber attack?
So I really am one of those believers, and Brad knows I came from spending 25 years on the client side, being the person buying the tools, hiring the people, hiring wonderful organizations like Brad's to come in and help us. And it is when it comes down to it, I think it's having your programs and process in place. So we're talking about ransomware today, but let's be honest, your incident response program is probably one of the biggest things, because when you look at it, you're reviewing, looking at what you're doing with regards to your backups. You're looking at what you're doing with regards to protecting Active Directory and having alerts on certain things. You can have tools that do that, but let's be honest, just having a simple logging of, earlier we talked about the actors shutting off logging. Well, you should be monitoring if all of a sudden your logging stops. I mean, again, it's best practices. There are solutions that you should have in place, but I think really driving through and having a program developed and understanding what your incident response program looks like is huge. Because one thing that I always talk about with different CISOs is you're worried about identifying, protecting, responding, and recovering. If you forget to recover, I'm sorry, but that is probably the most important, because I can tell you no matter what, you will get hit. There's nothing you're going to put in place that's going to stop it. So I don't know, Brad, without diving too deep right away into this, but what are your thoughts that you're seeing? I mean, it's not a tools-based solution, that you're trying to solve for.
No, I totally agree. It's not a tools problem per se. It's maybe how we're using the tools. And, to your point, you either have to plan for success or you're planning for failure by default. And so build the plan for how you respond. And then, like anything, practice, and then practice. The other thing we see with tools is, being able to get another set of eyes, on the information. Sometimes we'll say, why is it important not just to, log inbound traffic, but to log outbound traffic? And we can tell you that because we're looking at visibility from many angles. That's a simple scenario, but it's also, looking at an endpoint protection platform. If we see, 10 clients with the same endpoint protection platform with different data coming in, we know that you may not have all of the indicator detection turned on for your platform. So you haven't optimized your tool. So we can help you to optimize that tool so that you can, get better visibility to the threats, or we can with you. It's all about optimizing what you have, planning for, some type of event, and then practicing what do you do when that event occurs.
It does come back to that IR program and understanding capabilities mappings also of all their tools. Because if you think about it, yes, it's not a tools problem, but to your point that you made, if they don't have their EDR deployed everywhere, or they don't have NDR in place looking at certain things, and there's another type of solution that I think gets overlooked so often, which is deception. Putting a deception solution in place that when the bad guy, I hate to say it, is crawling around there and knocks over an empty can on a tile floor, it makes a ton of noise. Well, guess what? That's what you want, so that a team like yours or the victims team can say, hey, wait a second, I just heard something down the hall. Somebody go check that out. So I think that's really important. Another area, at least when you're talking about the incident response side of it that they're looking at, when you go through and do kind of a program review on some of that, you're looking at on-site and off-site storage. You're looking at your cloud application backups, Office 365, your line of business apps. You look at your backup policies, the frequency and retention. Key thing here, test and restore those solutions. Another, besides your processes and policies, something that people don't look at is their cyber insurance. The policy that security doesn't own, that's probably tagged onto your E&O insurance. You need to go back into the business and look and go, well, what are we covered for? What do we have to do to make sure we're covered? Because if you don't do something you need to, guess what? Your insurance company isn't paying. And that's a really bad day.
From ransomware threats to security tool overload, today's CISOs are facing a mountain of challenges. What are some of the biggest struggles they face, and how can the cybersecurity community work together to help combat these issues?
Great question. And oh, to be a CISO today. You know, the environment is ever changing, and you know, constant targets. But it is a fun opportunity to work in teams and in tandem with other people in the industry. One of the things that we see is CISOs, really are a community of people that have the same mission. They're passionate about defending their enterprises and their organization. They're passionate about helping each other, and it's nearly impossible to go solo and fly alone. You have to fly as a group. So I know, Macy, you've got some organizations that you've actually put together and belong to. How are you guys seeing this, as a tandem event to help, combat the cybercrime?
Yeah, no, that's actually a great lead in. You hit some key words. I've made a quick note. The passion, the mission. Again, coming from the background of defense and contractors and intelligence and law enforcement, mission has always been my focus. And CISOs are no different. But when it comes down to it, it is a community, and it has to be, and the information sharing. So, and that's how these groups started, all of them. And our board gets reached out to on a regular basis, and we just share the format. Again, we're not selling anything. There's no cost, and we don't collect any money. It is all about doing better for the organizations. Now, going back to the biggest struggles for CISOs, I sat in the seat for 25 plus years, and now I'm, even though I'm, more on the partner side, I'm still a virtual CISO for 4 different organizations right now, where either I'm coaching the CISO, where think of the CISO laying on a couch and I'm counseling them, or it is I'm actually their person, and they're struggling with the metrics, not just of how do I measure up against my peers, but how do I show value to my board or give them the comfort that we're even doing what we should be doing. But I think one thing that I look at that the CISOs are really struggling with, and if you think about it, it really is the overload. It is the stress. You compile being siloed during COVID. You compile on that of I've heard CISOs say, I just need to stick with this job right now because until we get out of this pandemic. They're working 12 hours a day because they never leave this laptop. That stress, honestly, is almost worse than all the rest of the things you and I just talked about. And we need to work together better, no matter who it is.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And I think, we talk about the tool overload, but it's a tool set for protection and detection, but we're still missing something in the security operational unit, and that's business intelligence. So, as you relate to that, you look at, if I'm in manufacturing, I have business intelligence system. If I'm in human resources, I have business intelligence systems. Us security guys, we don't have a business intelligence platform, but we need it. In other words, as I run a security operations, and I run several globally for our business, which services our clients, but security officers need to understand, out of all the data that I'm collecting from all the tools that I have, the size of business, the number of users that I have, how can I effectively run this business operations unit, and what am I measuring? In the process flow is very important. And then understanding, do I add another SOC analyst? Do I add another security engineer? Do I turn to shared services models? All of those things are business related, as in how do I run this operational unit effectively, and what are my measurements? And then how do I compare? Is there an industry standard on any of this? I'd like to pull down a book and say, here's your manual, and Macy, you haven't written one yet. I know you will.
I probably should. Brad, you nailed it. I can't even tell you, because going back and applying it to the business, I mean, think about it. The amount of data, we have more than enough data. The problem is nobody looks at it, or they don't know how to look at it. But if CISOs don't actually understand, they may even understand that they need that whole stack of different metrics. The problem is, and you made a good point, maybe I will go start working on a book for this, is actually writing what those metrics are. Because a lot of the books that when I was coming up in the industry that were about security metrics, I hate to say it, they weren't written by people that sat in the seat. They were written by analysts, or they were written by someone that was building a tool that wanted to sell something. And I know that sounds crappy, but it really was. So yeah, that's a good point. You actually gave me an idea.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank Macy and Brad again for joining us. If you have any questions related to any of the topics discussed today, please feel free to reach out to us at proficio.com or proficio.es in Spanish. Thank you for tuning in and hope you join us on the next episode of Proficio Cyber Chats.